Welcome to Ham Radio Perspectives. I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
I'm Quin, K8QS, and as you may know, we've got a collaborator with us now, and Stuart or Stu from Texas Land is doing some fantastic research, including on this topic. Welcome again, Stu.
Howdy. Nice to be here. By the way, I'm in Arkansas.
You're in Arkansas. Why did I say Texas?
Well, that's where I was. I snuck across the border a few years ago.
Okay. So we're looking at classic ham radio kits, and some of these companies make more than just ham radio kits. And Stu has done some fantastic research on this. We'll throw in some goodies along the way for you to consider. But I thought right at the very beginning, I should hijack the entire presentation by throwing something at you guys that Tom knows because I shared it with him, but Stu, you may not know this. And here it is. This is my first kit. This is a transmitter that I built that was explained in 73 magazine. And I looked at this, it was March 63, a one-tube transmitter. I thought, gee, I can make that thing. And it's, you know, a whopping half watt with a 90-volt battery of the portable B plus type. And I constructed this thing. I don't remember what exactly I built it in. You can see the one that this guy built on the bottom left there. But what I wanted to say to you guys that is so interesting about ham kits is that 73 magazine, when they would have these simple kits, often they would sell all the parts to you. So on the bottom right, when you look at this slide, it says 73 parts kit. The parts for this little rig are available for immediate delivery. The tube, the socket, the variable condenser, RF choke, condenser, resistors, terminal strip, etc. Prepaid, get this, $6. Now, of course, this is back in the 60s, but what a great idea. I love, this is one of the first kits that I built on my own without an actual prefabricated kit, if I can use that term. And I remembered it because it was called the, oh gosh, I've forgotten the name of it now. But I found it through the Internet Ham Radio Archive using the name, the Peanut Whistle. And in the index of this magazine, it referred to it as the Peanut Whistle. So that's how I managed to get back there to find it.
You still have it?
I wish I did.
So this brings us to Heathkit. Yeah, founded in Benton Harbor, Michigan, 1947. Stayed in business through 1983 with their ham radio products. They started out by Mr. Heath purchasing 6 military surplus boxcars full of unknown electronic parts and decided what to do with these. They started out building the OA1 oscilloscope. And then they gravitated into more of the ham radio line of products and continued that until 1983. They finally filed for bankruptcy in, unfortunately, 2012.
And they made so many kits that they had their own catalog. Remember that?
Right.
Yes.
They also had their own color scheme of that kind of medium green to set them off from the other manufacturers and kit builders.
Yep.
Yeah, and just today I was with a friend here locally who's going to redo all the caps in his Heath receiver. I don't want to say anything more than that because there's a special video we're going to do on how he's doing that process, which is very different from what you would think. So the Sugar Baker SB. Anything else you want to add to this one, Stu?
Yeah, that they did that color scheme and the design of those radios specifically to compete with Collins, obviously.
Right.
And they were then known as the poor man's Collins radio. But the interesting thing about these particular receivers, anyway, is that they used a factory-built pre-aligned LMO oscillator that came, so you didn't have to mess with it because they didn't trust the average kit builder to do this right and get it calibrated. And if you didn't calibrate it correctly, that the whole thing would be thrown off.
Yep. And then they would have all the service calls and all.
Right.
So it was beautiful. I had my first Heathkit was an SWR bridge. I had the Cantenna. I had the HX20 mobile single 6146, and others in there. Another receiver, and others that I couldn't recall. Oh no, not KnightKit. What can you say about KnightKit? I mean, this is Chicago right here. You guys that can complain about my Chicago accent, just get used to it. And Chicago, the KnightKit right there, Allied Radio. What street were they on, Tom? Do you remember?
They were on Western Avenue.
Western Avenue. So you could go down there up to the counter and buy the kit and get it home the same day. You didn't have to wait for shipping for those of us who live there.
Wow.
So we were salivating when we got enough money together and somebody to drive us down there. 50s to 1971, that house brand of Allied Radio, which also had its own catalog. They had the T60 you see there, the R55A. And which one did you have, Tom?
I still have a T60, and we have our dearly departed T150 transmitter. I
thought you started with a T40.
No, I started with a DX40 Heathkit.
That's right. DX40.
But I have managed to accumulate a T60 transmitter. As a matter of fact, I went to the Indy Ham Fest several years ago, and as the show was closing up, a guy still had it on his table, and I was looking at it. He had it marked for $5, and nobody was taking it. And I looked at it, and he says, take it. Still got it.
Great story. And of course, they also named many of their rigs like the Great Star Roma receiver. I had one of those. Eventually, they were absorbed by Tandy Radio Shack in 71, which made some sense at the time. But a great kit company.
I, too, had a T60. And I still remember the smell that thing had when the SWR was, let us just say, incorrect. I think I connected it to a folding dipole. And I remember that little meter on the front panel. So very, very unique piece of gear.
So what about EICO, Stu?
Well, that's another one that they were basically a big test equipment company. And they added some ham gear, I guess, in the late 50s. A couple of transmitters and actually a transceiver. And they stuck around for, several, 20 years or so, and finally liquidated the company in just 1999.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff around. I still see it.
Yep.
It was quality stuff, and their kits were well known as being quite good. I never had one of these.
Well, that's Conar Instruments, and they were these were the kits you built when you joined the National Radio Institute Correspondence School. If you remember the little ads in the back of magazines, send in this coupon and we'll register for you to get into the exciting world of electronics. And they usually had a picture of a guy with an oscilloscope, a drawing actually of a guy with an oscilloscope working on a TV. But these were the learning tools of the NRI. And once you subscribe to their correspondence school, you'd be sent these kits. And very similar to Heathkits as far as this construction goes. They had an elaborate manual that showed you piece by piece how the kit was constructed. They'd have a testing section after you completed each section of the build. And, I haven't seen any EHAM reviews on them, but they look pretty typical of the time. I believe, I think that's probably can't tell if that's a receiver over there or if a VFO. And then you've got a crystal controlled, probably no more than 75 watt CW transmitter. So yeah, they were around, they were a kit, but you had to join the school in order to procure one.
And those of you who have not seen the old-fashioned crystals that we used to be required to use as novices, there you see one in the transmitter on the right and two of them sitting to the left of the telegraph key. And my favorite was the 7170 frequency on 40 meters. Boy, I love that as a novice.
Oh, I bought a frequency 7151 megahertz. And what I didn't know at the time was Radio Moscow broadcast on 7150. So the only time I got out on that frequency is when they were off the air.
Oh boy, which wasn't much.
No.
Lafayette. Let's talk about Lafayette a little bit. I'm going to open with a snide comment here. I owned a couple of these. My buddies, including Marty, that I did one of the stories on, owned one of these. And I always felt that the sensitivity in the receivers was not very good. But they were buildable. They were fun. They looked pretty good. They had a mail order catalog to rival Allied, the Lafayette catalog, from about 21 to 1981. And finally had to declare bankruptcy in 81. But boy, they sold a lot of stuff.
Yep.
Right. And they had a line of receivers that were built at that time by Trio in Japan, which eventually became Kenwood. But I don't know if their kits looked very similar to a Trio product. So I don't know if it was a disassembled Kenwood or they had somebody else produce it.
Well, somebody watching this will know and will post a comment down below.
Right. Now here we have a couple of other decent, really good manufacturers, and they actually made these two products shown here were available, assembled or in kit form. On the left, you have World Radio Labs Globe Chief 90 transmitter, and these folks were from Council Bluffs, Iowa, and they were one of the biggest mail order houses of the era. And let's see, the cheapest way to get into a real 90-watt rig was to get yourself one of these Globe Chief 90 transmitters. It sold at the time for $50 for the kit, and if you wanted it wired, $65. So
amazing.
The price went up to $75 by 1958. And this thing had two 807s in it, believe it or not. Two 807s in the final. And the old 5U4 rectifier, 160 through 10 meters, crystal controlled. What else, right?
Yeah.
90 watts input, 70 watts for novice use in those days. Apparently that's what I didn't remember that was our limit, 75 watts.
Mm-hmm.
Thing weighed 27 pounds. Okay. On the right, you had, who could forget E.F. Johnson Company, the maker of lots of commercial equipment, coils, all kinds of parts, commercial radio equipment. They made a whole line of amateur transmitters, and this one on the right's the Viking. It's a mid-range model, and it cost $350 in those days to have it kit presented to you, or $500 if you wanted them to do it. And they came out with a newer version, the Viking Valiant 2, which the price went up a little bit, but didn't really change much. But it was an all-band transmitter at AM and CW, and you could get SSB with it later with an external exciter. They sold one online, actually. Anyway, it was 275 watts CW, 200 watts AM, and it used a famous pair of 6146s. I still have a couple of those tubes in my closet. Don't ask me why.
What was the cost again on the Viking 2?
The original model Valiant. I'm sorry, this is the Valiant and the Valiant 2. I don't know about the Viking. I guess that's still a Valiant. It did. The picture I've sent up. Anyway, the kit was $350.
Wow.
Factory assembled for $440.
That's $3,500 in our money today for the kit.
Wow.
Expensive. Yes. Very expensive.
Well built. And you don't happen to know what the weight of those things was like. Was it like 75, 80 pounds?
I happen to know that. It was 83 pounds. Yeah, today with the fragile furniture we have, a table would crush. It would crush a regular table today.
Right.
But
yeah, absolutely. Oh,
this
boy.
thing had two 866A mercury vapor rectifiers, which had beautiful purple color.
Yep.
Anyway, it was a classic. If you love tubes, you love the era of tubes, this was one of the things you wanted to have.
Absolutely.
But anyway,
Ameco. I remember Ameco stuff. In fact, I remember an Ameco kit, which was a code practice oscillator.
Mm-hmm.
and it had a little speaker on the top. And later I gutted the whole thing and made an electronic keyer, which I think had 2 tubes. And I mounted those tubes in the screen, the metal mesh on the top where they had the speaker for the code practice oscillator. So I converted it over to an electronic keyer so I could really get going with fast keying. But that AC1 transmitter was incredibly popular. Stu, do you remember much about it?
Never had one, and I remember seeing it in the catalogs. That was as far as I got with that. No.
Now that the Central Electronics exciter was really popular too, but I don't think they had an amplifier to go with it, did they?
Not that I know of. They had 2 different exciters and some type of modification for SSB. But,
and those little coils you see there, you had to switch coils,
right.
Huh?
Right.
But again, great reputation for being very well built.
Yep.
What about Hamtronics, Stu?
Well, these are 2 of the later companies, I think.
Yep.
They made, as you see, one of the boards here. I believe this, if I got this right, this was a 220 megahertz receiver board. So you could build the board and house it yourself. And they made these converters, receivers, and some repeater boards.
Yeah, they were known as a kit company.
Yeah.
And made some good stuff, the early stuff with some transistors and all. And then we get into Ten-Tec, which I've probably owned 8 or 10 different Ten-Tecs over the years. I always loved them. And I saw, Tom, when you were doing your field day in your backyard, you had an old Ten-Tec.
I've got a Ten-Tec, a Rebel, which is the UD Arduino based controller on it, and it's very similar to that 1340 transceiver, with the exception that it does have the Arduino board on it, where you can actually rewrite the software on it, and it turns into a really durable little 5-watt rig. So Ten-Tec, a lot of the boards came already pre-assembled, and you just merely added the board, soldered it together, added the controls, put it in the cabinet. They were very simple to assemble. And I'm really surprised that they didn't have the market penetration that they should have, because they were actually a very good looking and very well built, once you got it put together, little radio.
Well, let's talk a little bit about MFJ and Ramsey. Either you guys want to start out?
Yeah, I'll take this. These are often mentioned together as modern era kit houses, but they were complete opposites. MFJ was mainly an assembled product giant that had a few kits, but Ramsey was a kit house from beginning to end. And MFJ, as most hams know about MFJ, was founded by a guy named Martin Jew, K5FLU, in 1972. His initials for the company name. Literally worked out of a room in an old hotel in Starksville, Mississippi, but became very famous for various reasons. He had a couple of kits. The biggest kit he had was the 8100K World Band SWL receiver, which was a regenerative shortwave receiver that they said stayed in that catalog for years. It was a pretty good kit. But most of the products, as you probably know, if you've ever looked at the catalog or anything, they were pre-assembled things.
Right.
Unfortunately, he decided that he was going to give it all up in May of 2024. He claimed that the COVID lasting damage got to him, of course, but things have changed in the world anyway, technology speaking. And of course, as we mentioned in an earlier presentation, ITU Corporation of Linton, Indiana, has bought several of their products, antenna products and amplifier products, High Gain and Cushcraft, and then Ameritron and Mirage. And of course, they'll be moving just 2 hours west of Tom here, and by the end of this year.
Right.
Now, Ramsey Electronics, which I confess I know nothing about, started in the 70s and went all the way through 2016. They were out of New York, and they were a hobby kit house from the very beginning. And they made all kinds of learning kits, low power AM and FM broadcast transmitters, and they did make a few pieces of ham gear, a simple CW transmitter or two, a QRP receiver called the QRP-20, and the FX 146 2-meter phase lock looped FM transceiver, and some test equipment. And they even made a laser light show kit. But
wow.
Yeah, the main thing that this company did, Ramsey, were their manuals. They were the real product. They didn't just say, for example, install R14. They explained circuit theory, what each component was doing, and how to troubleshoot it when it didn't work. So a lot of people apparently learned electronics from a Ramsey manual as much from the kit.
Great.
Now, they ended their company in January of 2016 and dumped the remaining inventory onto Amazon. But they did end with a good statement. They ended that, quote, "We wanted to end our heritage with a smile, not a frown."
Yeah, that educational component in Ramsey kits, that's what I always thought about them for, if you want to learn something.
Right.
Now, let's look at this. Explain to us what you did with this, Stu, because this is really great.
Well, this just shows what was available and what is available in terms, in easy to read terms. For example, on the left, you have the two big boys in the past, Heathkit and KnightKit. And on the right, you can call them, you have today's kit scene. So if you look in the top left, you'll see that Heathkit and KnightKit, when they started, and then when the other current generation started. But the biggest difference is if you look at the typical power of the kits, the original ham radio transmitter kits were fairly significant power levels, 75 to 100 watts. Now today's kits, when they're for transmitters, they're the QRP type stuff, 5 watts or less, right? The build time used to be 40 to 80 hours plus. You had hundreds of point-to-point wired parts. I still remember sitting over a soldering iron doing that, with all the parts put in little muffin tin pieces and everything. Man, anyway, today's kit, one evening to a weekend. And of course, a lot of stuff today is surface mount, and that was already pre-populated in the boards today. Turns out that one of the reasons a lot of these companies went out of business is surface mount components manufacturing got so cheap that it was easier to put that together ahead of time. A kit to do that would be more expensive than the product already done in a factory. Okay, and in the old days, you had kits from national companies with thousands of employees and major mail order catalogs. And today, they're mainly 1 to 3 person cottage operations, typically sold directly from a personal website.
And Tom, you have one kit on order now, a small item.
Right.
And tell us how long the wait time is to get it.
I ordered it on June 24th. And I went to the website and I followed their production sequence. And I am number 634 on the list. So I expect maybe delivery, hopefully around Christmas time.
Yeah, and we're recording this on August 13, just to give you an idea. So this mini kit market, this cottage industry, is big. And people will wait to get the right thing that they want, typically in these QRP rigs.
Right.
So what about you? Let's see. Heathkit and KnightKit basically started and founded their businesses on full lab grade kits, oscilloscopes, VTVMs, remember VTVMs, signal generators, basically test equipment. And then they eventually got into the ham radio business. KnightKit, Allied Electronics, actually started about 1928 and manufactured radios, basic AM radios for the general population, and then they finally got into the kit building business in the mid 50s, early 60s. And today's scene, you're building small accessories only, dummy loads, RF probes, attenuators, and the part I hate is winding your own toroids.
Toroids. Oh.
if there's anything you got to troubleshoot on one of today's kits, is if you had the toroid wound correctly. Back in the day, prices for a Heathkit DX60 was $80 in 1962. Value today is about 10 times that, $850. If you had to buy a new one, you could get an IC 7300 for that nowadays.
Just think about that, Tom.
Yeah, well, I paid $40 used for my DX40 in 1964. That was a lot of paper route money. Okay, that'd be equivalent today of $400 for a 75-watt crystal controlled CWAM transmitter. Forget the receiver. That was another $100. Today, like the QCX Plus, the Pebble HF, you're looking at roughly $50 to $125 as is. Maybe add another $25, $30 to it if you can buy them already assembled. So today, value-wise, that's a bargain.
It really is. Now, this is part one, where we're looking at kind of the old kits, and then a couple of comments about what happened with the old kit market and the new kits that are out there. And so we've got parts 2 and 3 coming up here soon, spotlighting some of the largest ham kit companies, the QRP labs, and so on. So stay tuned. We're moving beyond the classic ones and looking more specifically at what's going out there now. Stu, thanks for your great research on this. It's a blast out of the past. And I think what surprised me most about this was thinking about how much we were willing to pay for kits, as well as how much we enjoyed them, the old kits, and the size of some of those and the power of them and all compared to today, which you just couldn't make the kits at a rate that anyone would buy them, I don't think.
No, I'll still never forget putting together one of those single band Heathkit transceivers. It was a 20 meter one, the little bitty sweep tube, TV sweep tube final, right?
Yeah.
I remember in the bedroom putting it together. Took 3 or 4 nights. I don't know. And the last day was a Saturday. I put the tubes in, and I plugged it in. Of course, it had to have an external power supply, which I had bought earlier, and turned this thing on, and it worked. I mean, the thrill of having a transceiver that you build work. And I talked to somebody on 20 meters, obviously, and I was just amazing. Can't get that thrill again today.
No, not of that kind. So this is Ham Radio Perspectives, where we look at ham radio history, culture, and technology. This has been all 3 of those at once. And we appreciate you tuning in. Please give us a thumbs up, throw out some ideas. We'll look for the next 2 videos we've got coming out on kits as well. And we would love to hear from you. So if you've got some ideas on topics or other things you'd like to respond to, tell us about your experiences with kits, the good, the bad, and the ugly. One of the worst things, though, Stu, is buying a kit, getting it home. You buy it used at a ham fest and it's not working. But for those who had really good manuals, you could go back through there, do some testing, good schematic, know what the voltages were and so on, and you could test it and get it working again. So 73, everybody. I'm Quin, K8QS.
I'm Tom, WA9TDD.
I'm Stuart, WA5US.
Adios.